But the fact of the matter is, there's still fur farms, there's still factory farming, there's still performing animals, there's still lab testing. There's still things that are done that are atrocities. I think, unfortunately, people love their dog and cat to pieces, and they'll be like, "Well, I just can't give up bacon. It tastes so good." There's this cognitive dissonance. I think if people were exposed more to what happens in factory farming, they would think differently, but they know it and they don't want to see it. They turn a blind eye.
Welcome to the Better Life for Animals podcast, where we amplify the voices of animal advocates, sanctuaries, and changemakers working toward a kinder, more compassionate world. Through powerful stories and expert insights, we shine a light on the efforts to rescue, protect, and advocate for animals. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. Every follower helps us reach more people and support animal sanctuaries. Enjoy the conversation.
Tawny Hammond is the National Advisor for No-Kill Advancement at Best Friends Animal Society, a national nonprofit working to end the killing of dogs and cats in America's shelters and make the country no-kill. Best Friends Animal Society also operates the nation's largest no-kill animal sanctuary, headquartered in the Red Rock Canyons of Kanab, Utah. She spent 25 years in municipal government in Fairfax County, Virginia, and served as Chief of Animal Services for Austin, Texas, where her leadership helped Austin and Travis County achieve a 98% save rate for over 17,000 animals in a single year. Today, Tawny works at the national level, helping shelters understand what no-kill really means and how to get there. She is an author, executive coach, and licensed USCG Master Captain. Tawny, welcome to the show. We're so glad to have you here.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. That's a pleasure.
Tawny, you spent 25 years in municipal government before stepping into animal services leadership. So I'm just wondering, what was that moment or experience that redirected your path towards animals?
It's a really good question. My whole life, I've been interested in animals and the compassionate care and treatment of them since I was a little kid, honestly. Really, my first memories are around animals. And I think it was a natural transition. I was in Parks and Recreation for 25 years. And in Parks and Recreation, I had the opportunity to manage large natural and cultural parks. And for 12 years, I was the manager of a 500-acre parcel or park just outside of Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia. And it just was so culturally rich. And I got involved just with wildlife protection. And I learned a lot through my training, through working with naturalists, becoming a certified interpretive guide through Smithsonian programs, that the protecting of wildlife, our natural and cultural resources is really important to me. But that kind of intersected for me with how I felt about animals in general, since I was able to make my own decisions when I was a teenager. I told my parents I was no longer eating meat at the tender age of 16. They supported it. And so it's always been a thread and a constant. I was recruited by the police department, which the shelter was under, when I was in a executive internship program. They needed a leader for the shelter. And so I was asked to apply. And I was hesitant. I'm not going to lie to you. I knew it was a tall order. I had taken a look at the data and statistics. It caused me concern. I went through the process, which was rigorous because it was the police department. It took 4 months, but I stayed the course, and the rest is history.
Very interesting. When you became Chief of Animal Services in Austin, Texas, what was the state of the shelter when you arrived, and what was your very first priority?
Yeah, in when I retired from my service in Fairfax County, I had been recruited by Austin, and I'd applied, and I was a finalist. I did a lot of research. I knew they were the one of the first and largest no-kill communities in the nation, and I was super excited about the opportunity. A lot of work had gone into where Austin was when I got there. You know, 6 years of hard work of making Austin no kill starts and stops, and they were fully committed. So I found a community and I found an organization that was technically no kill, but I also found animals still losing their lives. I call it for lack of resources or for convenience, which sounds awful, but there were solutions that could have been found. So I technically they were no kill. They met the definition and the threshold, but one of the things that I found is that animals were still losing their lives that didn't have to. And we just set about changing that. We weren't chasing a number, we were making decisions every day that led to that number. When I was in Virginia, I didn't sit there and say, well, I want to be 90% or better. When I was in Virginia and I got into it, I said, well, I don't want to kill any animals. We're not trying to end euthanasia. If an animal is suffering, irremediably suffering, and there's no hope of recovery, of alleviating that suffering, and it's at the end of its life, we're not trying to end euthanasia. I'm talking about ending an animal's life there's some solutions to be had. And so in Austin, I found that, and my immediate priority, they were at capacity. We were at capacity all the time, which basically means all the kennels were full all the time. And the media always talked about it being overcrowded, and it just drove me crazy. I hated that word. And the reason I hated it is because just the implications of that word, overcrowded, it was as a loaded word, where I felt the solutions had not been employed yet that keeps animals with their families because, we're practicing punitive measures. Austin wasn't so much. Austin was very progressive, very progressive. But by and large, animal shelters really were operating, this is 10 years ago, as pounds.
Hmm.
So if you didn't have $100 to come get your animal, you weren't going to get your animal, and it probably would be destroyed, be killed at the end of the week or the end of the next week or whatever the timeline was. Austin was doing quite well, but I just saw animals that were still, and their lives could still be saved. And so I started focusing on that, and I also saw the staff under duress. What I found is that they felt it was almost like the Alamo. I was in Texas, and the shelter was hunkered down in a survival mentality where they felt the community and other nonprofits, because there was a government, it was the city of Austin that I worked for, felt like they were they were like the enemy and they were the bad guys and been villainized. And I wanted to open that up so it was more of a culture of esprit de corps. The community's with us. The nonprofits are with us. We're not alone. We don't have to batten down the hatches and hide and be beleaguered. Um, and that they're in it with us. And I think that's a really important point for animal shelters. And that's what I really focused on in Austin. And I know I've given you a couple of things, but one was making sure we truly weren't ending pets' lives for lack of space or lack of resources. And the other thing was changing the culture so it wasn't one of a us and them mentality.
Would you say that that is the definition of no kill? Because you just mentioned it's not, eliminating euthanasia.
Right. Yeah, for uh what we're trying to create in our nation and what we are creating in our nation is shelters that we're flipping the script. Instead of it being, well, we can't, there's no guarantees. This is an open access municipal shelter. We'll try to get your pet adopted, but we can't promise anything. And that's exactly what is being said still in shelters in the United States, and what was being said in the shelters that I worked in Virginia. And, we put an end to that. We're flipping the script. No kill is flipping the script, and it's life first and end of life when everything else has been exhausted. And so it's, we have a moniker, save them all. And basically, we're talking about saving all of the animals that can be saved. We're not talking about ending euthanasia. I think that people get confused about that and think that no kill is about animals suffering in cages their whole life or being kept alive when they should have been euthanized. It would have been the kindest thing to do for a pet. Um, and that's not what no kill is. And no kill is definitely about changing the way sheltering is done so that pets are kept with their families or returned to their families if they become separated, helping people keep animals in their lives as long as those animals are safe, and finding life-saving solutions for pets. Sometimes it's just things with no kill that you don't do that are powerful. For instance, not taking in healthy cats with collars and bells and microchip pets and animals that are healthy. Somebody loves that animal. Where are they? Pets, you've heard the stories like in People magazine and on TV, and pets, generally when they're lost near their home. That's why we try and keep them in their neighborhood and don't transport them out because the easiest way for a lost pet to be found is in the neighborhood. But you also hear stories of pets like being found like 50 miles away. And so, keeping pets with their families is super important. And then finding new homes or working with nonprofits that can help municipal shelters and rehoming pets.
So by 2017, Austin had reached a 98% save rate, which is amazing. So I know you've talked about them, but are there other two or three changes that dramatically made that shift?
Yeah, no, biggest one is trying to change the culture so the staff felt empowered and like hometown heroes that they should have been treated like. And really, people wanted to treat him that way. It's just when the change came about in Austin to end the killing, it was a mandate from city council and the mayor's office. And so they were told that this is what they were going to do. But, and I would love to talk about the institutionalizing of killing animals. But the other thing was really with being at capacity, aka overcrowded, which I didn't like that word. We weren't implementing all of the solutions that we could. And the other thing too that I hope we can get into a little bit is, animal services is not yet a discipline. If your house catches on fire, God forbid, my house catches on fire, the fire squad shows up. They're both in red trucks. They both have the same type of gear on, regardless of the city. They're carrying the same equipment. They're using the same techniques, same policies, procedures, the SOPs. By and large, the training is the same from one city and county to the next in the United States. It's a discipline, as is schools, as is libraries, as is Parks and Recreation. We have one association for the United States for Parks and Recreation, the National Association of Parks and Recreation. I belong to it, went to the conference. Each state has their own association. Animal Services is not there yet. We're going through this dramatic transformation of the profession. It is a profession, it is a field. Some people feel insulted when I say it's not a discipline. And it's not meant to insult them because when you look around the United States, it varies greatly in cities and counties how animal services is implemented. And that's not a discipline. And that's something Best Friends is working on with Southern Utah University, is creating that discipline. And I think that was probably, one of the things we were going to chat about. But the reason I'm bringing it up in relationship to the question is because we weren't a discipline, we were inventing those things in Austin. We were inventing those things. Like, for instance, one of the first I think we were one of the first to start what we call now managed intake. And basically, that is triaging situations at the front door. Is this an emergency? Or can this intake wait? Are you moving in a month? Can you wait? Because the person behind you may have been evicted or maybe dealing with domestic violence or maybe dealing with a death in the family. That scenario could be urgent and it's a today scenario. And the person behind them could be, well, no, I haven't really tried to rehome my pet. I could go through my church or my synagogue. I could go through my homeowners association and next door, and I could kind of vet my own choice for my pet. I could talk to people, interview them, and say, hey, we're moving. We're moving to another country. We can't take him or her with us. You could rehome your pet. And so we started doing that. And it was in the early phases of doing it because before that, it was just intake. It was chaos. It wasn't managed. You never knew what was going to happen on any given day. It was hard to staff for, it was hard to budget for, and animals were being killed regularly under that old system. So it was a long answer to your simple question of what were the other things we did in Austin. Some of it was tweaking things that existed, like long care foster programming, short-term foster programming for animals that were coming undone behaviorally in the shelter. That was fairly new in Virginia, to the best of my knowledge. We were one of the first shelters to start letting the naughty dogs go into foster. And when I say naughty, they were doing stuff in the shelter that could have cost them their life in the old way of doing things. Spinning, jumping, barrier reactive, leash climbing, mouthy, fear reaction, acting, pancaking and not moving from the back. You'd have to drag them out. There's all kinds of behaviors that they would be being deemed unadoptable and would have been killed, destroyed that week. And we were like, wait a minute, these animals are not doing well in this stressful, cacophonous, we might think disinfectant and bleach smells great, but they're little sensitive noses and they're sensitive ears. We were getting them out of the shelter into specialized, we were handpicking the fosters. Again, this is something that wasn't widely done. And so, just it's a long answer, but some of the stuff was us inventing pilot programs to see how it helped us with life saving.
So then all that experience was then put to good use at Best Friends, where I now working on an ambitious goal to put this template in place across the country.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You could have pushed me over with a feather. When you could have pushed me over with a feather when I realized there was an opportunity for me at Best Friends. I found out about Best Friends fairly early in my tenure in Virginia. And pun intended, they were lifesavers. I connected with the chairman of the board through associates, friends of colleagues, Francis Batista. And I remember here I am calling the chairman of the board of a large nonprofit and asking him for some advice and contacts. And he connected me with other directors around the country that helped me with some problem solving. And which was really helpful. And I started attending the conferences, and it was a big game changer for me. And then when the opportunity came open, I originally had a plan to be in Austin longer. My spouse and I relocated to Austin from Virginia. I've been in Virginia 25 years. And we really wanted to be there longer, but this opportunity opened up with Best Friends. And I loved the idea of being part of taking what I learned and helping others do that. I felt like I could do life-saving on a more exponential basis of helping others. And it was a hard decision because I loved Austin. Austin was great. Thought I'd be there longer. And so that was a tough one, but it wasn't hard going to working with Best Friends. And, at the time, a year prior to me coming to Best Friends, our CEO, Julie Castle, had made an announcement at conference. I remember I was standing leaning on a wall and she was on stage. It was dark, big auditorium, like a ballroom. and the stage is lit up, and I think it was her closing remarks for the conference. And she said, we're going to make, she made this bold announcement that Best Friends was going to lead the country to no kill. And it was like electric. It was electric. And my heart was beating so fast. And I joined Best Friends the next year. And I was really proud to be part of this effort of bringing the country to no kill. And back then, I mean, before Best Friends pulled all the data together, we didn't even know how many shelters there were. We didn't know, um, again, we didn't know where the killing was happening. I mean, we had a general idea, but there was no national database. There was data here and there, but some states didn't require their shelters to report information. Some states did. And, Best Friends pulled all that together. And now we know how many shelters are in the United States. We know where they're located. We know who's municipal. We know who's nonprofit. We know what the save rates are. We know what communities need help and where we can take our help, our grants, our mentorships, our in-bed programs, our shelter collaborative programs, all the programs that we're employing to help communities become no kill. Now we know, but we had to put that data set together. So yeah, it led me to Best Friends, and now I'm able to help others make those changes. And I work especially, I'm a professional coach, have my credentials and certifications, and so helping leadership, shelter directors navigate um, the archipelago, the all the changes, all the politics, the bureaucratic um, um, debris, things that they have to wade through and work through to get policy changes made and to get elected and appointed officials moving in that direction, wanting their community to be known as one of the best, practicing best practices, contemporary animal services.
You created the first national executive leadership certification program for animal services. So why did that program needed to exist, and what gap are you filling?
Oh, it's a great question, and it fits in with what I said earlier about uh, animal services not yet being a discipline.
Hmm.
That's why we created that. It was a
Okay.
certification that was recognized through Southern Utah University, and it's actually part of a degree program. You can get your master's degree in interdisciplinary studies from Southern Utah University, and contemporary animal services can be your emphasis of study. It's one of the first in the country. It's a historic first. And that certificate was to help. Um, it's a 6 month program. It's very rigorous. That helps professionals, leadership at the top level, implement no-kill, life-saving policies, procedures, and programs. And it's not just it's not really like how to. We do get into how to, the mechanics of it, toolkits, resources, but it's also about emotional intelligence. It's about knowing your strengths, knowing what you're good at, having self-awareness, and also like uncovering what your why is, dealing with basic and fundamental uh, skill building that will help them be a better leader. When I say basic, these folks are already at the top of their game. They wouldn't be sitting in that chair as the shelter director or the animal services director or their animal control director. They've already impressed somebody. And so, but you'd be surprised, and you probably wouldn't, that when you start peeling back, it's like an onion, the layers, a lot of people have imposter syndrome. Um, they're worried about very basic things. There's fear there that keep them from achieving greatness in their life, and it's happens with human beings. And I've learned that through my coaching. But with animal services, there is that fear. What happens if what I'm trying doesn't work? What if I upset my boss? What if I upset my chain of command? A lot of times animal services are under the chief of police or the sheriff's department or the mayor's department. So you fly kind of close to the sun. It's so bizarre and ironic. On one hand, animal services has been hidden away on the outskirts of town and almost an afterthought, under-resourced, undervalued. But on the other hand, you see it lands in mayor's office, chief of police, sheriff's departments, close to the sun. So it can be very political. It's very, I didn't realize that. I knew both of those things to be true, but the juxtaposition of it, the bookending of it, and the irony of it just occurred to me. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
You're listening to Better Life for Animals podcast. Our mission is to amplify the voices of animal advocates, sanctuaries, and changemakers working toward a kinder, more compassionate world. But we can't do it alone. We need your help. First of all, go ahead and subscribe to this channel wherever you're watching or listening. And then get involved by visiting betterlifeforanimals.com. That's betterlifeforanimals.com. Be sure to check out our blog, learn more about incredible sanctuaries, and explore our book section, where 100% of net proceeds from book sales are donated to sanctuaries. Every action you take helps to make a difference. And remember, subscribe to this channel. And now, back to the show.
If you're just joining us, we're talking with Tawny Hammond of Best Friends, and this is Better Life for Animals. Tawny, you've spoken about the connections between how we treat animals and the broader social justice and community wellness. Can you walk us through that link?
Yeah, I actually did a TEDx talk on this. I was really excited. TED picked it up, and I didn't know if they would. And it's on YouTube. And it was named for me. It's called Not Your Grandpa's Dog Pound. But I cite some studies in that talk I did, that TEDx talk. And we know that where people are suffering, animals are suffering. Where there's housing insecurity, food scarcity, health and wellness deserts, where people are struggling, you're going to find animals struggling. We see it with domestic violence. We see where people are in crisis, animals are in crisis. And so statistically, we know that to be true, that in areas where, the poverty index is higher, where there is housing discrimination, I call it discrimination when they discriminate against people with animals, landlords do, because under the law, animals are considered personal property. Now, you and I consider them family and friends, but under the law, they're personal property. And landlords are saying you can't have your personal property. They don't say you can't have a gun. They don't say you can't have a microwave. They don't say you can't have a motorcycle or, television, but they say you can't have your pet, which under the law is personal property. So that's why I call it discrimination. Where these things are happening, you'll see the shelters around there, more animals are being killed in those communities statistically. Now, the other piece to that equation is that, again, these are really interesting bookend facts and conditions that exist. We know from a scientific perspective that pets stave off loneliness. They complete us. They complete families. They help us with depression and anxiety. I mean, there's physical, scientific evidence that having an animal in your life and being around animals lowers your blood pressure, helps you feel better about life, helps us feel better about our place in this world. And you know what? It stitches us together socially. Like people will know their neighbors through the dogs and through their pets. They'll know, and they may not remember the neighbor's name, but they remember the dog's name. And they get to know them, and then they start talking about, hey, will you watch my house while I'm on vacation? Oh, I didn't know that your husband died. I'm so sorry about that. People talk to each other that have animals. It's like social fertilizer. We're connected socially. And the other things animals do for us, that when I talk about social equality, social justice, another thing, and this is what mayors and council members and county commissioners listen to, they contribute to the economy. And that's a biggie. Even if they don't love fur babies and they don't love animals like we do, um, they do love, uh, they do love, being well thought of. They do care about their city or their county's reputation. And economic vitality and development is important because it attracts people to come live there and it attracts jobs for the people, which helps with taxes, which helps them keep their roads fixed and their parks pretty and all the other things that make a community a great place to live. University of Denver did a really interesting study in 2017, and they did it in Austin, Texas. You can Google it. It's easy to find. And University of Denver, Austin, Texas, economic contribution of a no-kill policy. And when you're searching for it, and I think it was $157 million over 6 years was pumped into the Austin area economy just by the city's decision um, to be a no-kill city. And they even quoted Google in there. Google decided to they decided to establish a campus there, uh, like a main hub campus. One of the factors was the no-kill community, Austin being known as a no-kill community. And so they quoted that in that study. So those are the kind of things when I say that how we treat animals is a measure of our wellness as a community for those factors. I listed some negative ones, um, which is a sad fact. But there's also this positivity of what animals bring to our lives and the enrichment of our lives, and also elevating a city or county's brand image. So people want to move there, raise their families there, and companies want to bring their plants there and their headquarters there for jobs. It's right up there with being the best parks and the best schools and the best libraries. You don't want a substandard animal services department where people are afraid if their animal gets out, it's going to be killed.
I have been to Best Friends in Kanab, Utah, and I remember
Yay.
two things. I took my granddaughters there. There were two things that stuck with me. And one was how they treated the pit bulls, because you see these pit bulls around with these choke collars and they're treated like they're, artillery or something, which is very
Right.
upsetting. And I wondered how, what do they do? And they were training them with clicker training. So I came home going, this is a kind, easy
Yeah.
way. And they responded very well. There was none of this, harshness. And then the most impactful thing that happened to me was when I went into the bird sanctuary, which is basically a psych ward for these poor birds that have been just injured in their lives, not only physically, but psychologically. We were told to be quiet. These birds would never be adopted out. And I will never forget how they would mutilate themselves. And some of them had little sweaters on in order to protect their skin. And I took that picture and put it into one of the books that I wrote, because I still think about that, because what we're talking about, Tawny, is so important. And audiences respond to pets. They care a lot about the dogs and the cats, and I care about them too. And I also care about the chickens and about the cows and the turkeys. And I think we're all working to try and understand, how do we turn that switch on? How can you love your pet like it's your absolute child, as we do, but completely ignore the suffering that happened in order for you to have turkey on your plate? I know we're all looking to understand what it is about people that we can, open up or awaken that same feeling and extend it to all animals. And I think that that's really the beautiful message of Best Friends and the work you're doing, and how important it is that, we have to have political will, and we have to have money, and money counts, and saying money is going, if animals are going to help your communities, this all matters, But I really appreciate all the work that goes into all the little nuts and bolts in order to make a movement effective. So as someone who works from, the inside, nonprofits, and now national advocacy, where do you feel that the animal welfare movement still has the most growing to do?
Yeah, I'm glad you phrased it that way. People sometimes use words interchangeably, and animal welfare movement is exactly what it is, animal welfare movement. I always caution people not to use the word animal welfare when they're talking about animal services as a profession, because welfare is a softer word that we don't want to be using when we're trying to get funding for our animal shelters. It's not charity. They should be basically funding an animal shelter, animal control, animal services to be the very best it can possibly be. And how does that fit in? Well, it fits in with this bigger movement, the animal welfare movement. And this is something, and you know this, you're a subject matter expert on this. I listen to your podcasts and I just applaud your work. This started, you probably you've probably forgotten more than most people will ever know about this. But for me, when I'm talking to people, this started back in the 1850s with suffragists and the emancipation movement. And it was an awareness and awakening of other beings and their fate and injustices. And I think that as far as where we're going, first of all, I think we've come so far. We know that in the 80s, it's estimated we were killing about 20 million companion animals in shelters. I think it was much higher because we didn't have any reliable data. And now companion animals, dogs and cats in the United States were about 400,000. And 68% of the nation is no kill. And so 68% of the shelters are no kill in the country. So we've made amazing progress, and I think we've made progress um, with other animals and doing better by them. But the fact of the matter is, there's still fur farms, there's still factory farming, there's still performing animals, there's still lab testing. There's still things that are done that are atrocities. I think, unfortunately, people love their dog and cat to pieces, and they'll be like, "Well, I just can't give up bacon. It tastes so good." There's this cognitive dissonance. I think if people were exposed more to what happens in factory farming, um, they would think differently, but they know it and they don't want to see it. They turn a blind eye. And quite frankly, it's been very difficult growing up knowing what I know. I came from a family of farmers on my mother's side. And it's one of the reasons I stopped, even though it was a family farm and it wasn't a factory farm. I would say the treatment of animals should have been more humane, but it wasn't. There's a desensitization that happens, I think, with people um, around animals that are kept alive for their hides or for their meat that you're going to consume. And there's some farmers I've met that treat their animals very well, and they're insulted by when they hear about the abuses. Um, it hurts them. They truly care about their animals, and they would never want their animals abused. They're not shooting them up with chemicals. I don't know how they're staying in business because those ethical farmers and people that care for their animals are being squeezed out by the big factory farms. Um, and I think that we've come a long, long way, but we have a ways to go. And we just need to keep being consistent. It helps that there's plant-based options for people to get protein and to get the nutrients they need or that they think they need. Because, we know how the food pyramid was created, and it was created for commercial reasons. And it had nothing to do with what our body needed. And we know how that came about. And so it's driven by advertising and marketing and greed and all of that. And but we have, it's not all gloom and doom. We've come a long way. And but we have further to go. And it's sometimes it's really lonely and it's scary to, not scary, sad to, be the odd person out, the butt of jokes, about around meat. I can't even sit down to have a meal without somebody bringing up the fact that they're eating meat. And I'm really sorry, like they draw attention to it when I'm just trying to get through the meal. And they draw attention to the fact of what's on their plate. Well, I'm not saying anything. And
Yeah.
I'm like, look, you need to look in a mirror. Don't be messing with me. I'm over here eating my broccoli shaboom and my cauliflower steak and my quinoa salad. I haven't said word one, but people have, this guilt because and it's so tiresome, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it speaks more to their own discomfort because on some level we all know, the information is out there.
It's out there. And
Yeah.
your podcasts are very informative.
Thank you.
The information's out there. I think it drives me crazy when I sit down at a restaurant and they're like, what protein would you like? I'm like, can you just call it, and what animal would I like? Stop calling it protein. You basically have taken the face off the animal.
I like to
It's
say
chicken.
everything I just ordered has protein.
Right.
Yeah. Don't need any more. I'm good.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I love vegan athletes. Austin they have a veg fest and a lot of vegan athletes come in for it. And these men and women, look, if I ran into them, I would break every bone in my body. They're just built like walls. And because they're eating the fuel that the animals eat to build the animal muscles. They're eating that fuel and bypassing the animal's body. So anyhow, you and I could go on forever about that.
Well, I agree we could, but since we can't, before we say goodbye, is there anything else that you'd like to share that best friends would like people to just do one thing differently or one thing better in order to help support our
Yeah.
animal friends?
Yeah. I think getting involved in your community shelter, you know, it can feel enormous knowing that there's so much change that has to happen, and it can be disconcerting. And it's really what we want to be doing to make the world a better place with what resources and time we have left on this planet. I think is just doing what we can in our corner, our space. Every day we can make humane choices. What we put in our mouth, what products we buy. It's so easy to get vegan shoes now.
Mhm.
But coming from the best friend's perspective and helping get the nation to no kill, I think getting involved in your local shelter, finding out how they're doing. We actually have a pet life-saving dashboard on the best friend's website. You can type that right in, pet life-saving dashboard. You can click on your state, you can click on your town, your county, and you can see what shelters are no kill, which are great. And you can also see what shelters are not yet no kill and find out what is it that they need to get there. Is it volunteers? Is it fosters to take a pet into your home for a couple nights, a couple weeks to free up space for an emergency at your shelter? Some people don't have time, but they've got money. And some people don't have money, but they're willing to get politically involved and become advocates or activists. Best thing that you can do if you want to be an advocate or an activist, before you start applying pressure to an organization, find out where the block is. Beating the shelter director over the head in emails and on social media when they're not the block. The block might be who is their supervisor, who won't fund that shelter appropriately, or who doesn't believe in no kill. I had to be I'll be forthcoming. It's safe now. It's been 10 plus years. No, 12, 13, 14 years now, almost 15 years. I could never use the words no kill in Fairfax County. When I was working for the chief of police, I couldn't say those words. Well, first of all, they were new to me because I came from parks and I was striving for professional excellence. That's how I came to no kill. But I couldn't, when I found out what those words existed, I couldn't use that because it was radical, it was fringe. We don't want to be that way. But it's exactly what I did. So you don't have to use the words. You can just make the decisions to end the killing of pets in your shelter. So I think people listening to this podcast, find out about your community, what's needed. If your community is already no kill, super. What about the next community over? There's ways to get involved. We have campaigns. Our website's really chocked full of opportunities. Our legislation and advocacy team has action campaigns where people that live in a community can get involved and make a difference and support your shelter. Not some shelters are really trying hard. They're not yet there because there's things they're still figuring out and there's still resources they need. And the best way we can help is finding out where is the help needed the most, and applying the right help. Because I can't tell you how many times I see people getting really upset about the way their shelter's operating, and sometimes they're going after the wrong person. It's not necessarily the staff at the shelter. The staff at the shelter would love for change, or vice versa. It could be the mayor's all about no kill, or the chief of police, they want to have the bragging rights. They want to be the best shelter that they possibly can be in their county or their state. But the shelter director's been there 20 years and they're telling the constituents and they're telling the boss, hey, this is the way we do things. Those no-kill people are crazy. They're just like you and I hear it all the time. Vegans, they're nuts. They're zealous. And it could be that the pressure should be put on the elected officials. We want an animal shelter the pets in our community stand a chance at life first, not maybe.
And Tawny, that is bestfriends.org. Is it
Yes.
just bestfriends.org? Okay, great. Well, Tawny, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. This has been Tawny Hammond of Best Friends. And if you have enjoyed today's conversation, as I know I have, please like and subscribe so that we can create a better life for animals.
Thank you for joining us on the Better Life for Animals podcast. Together, we can create a world where all beings are treated with dignity, respect, and care. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening. It helps us reach more people and spread awareness about the incredible work happening in animal sanctuaries. You can also share this episode with friends and fellow advocates to keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep speaking up, taking action, and making a difference for the animals.